and I will post this on YouTube later. So what we can do in order to create an assignment, you have a variety of different options when you click that Create button. You can just create the normal assignment. You can create a quiz assignment. So this creates a form that automatically records student grades to Google Classroom. You can create a question. It can be multiple choice or a short answer. It's a good way to get some immediate input from kids. Also a material. Now materials you cannot grade, and you don't have an option for making a copy for every single student. This would be usually used for some sort of online resource that you just want to have a separate, what looks like an assignment, but it's just a separate line. And so if you've noticed, what I've done with materials down here is I have some online learning materials, Zoom meetings, and those are materials, they're not assignments. The most powerful thing in here is probably reuse post, so that if you do something on the regular basis, you can just click reuse post and then change up what you do. For example, we have a forum in environmental. Every week, students are supposed to respond on that forum, and every week there's a new assignment. So I just reuse the post, change the dates, and that way students see a new assignment for that forum post, and it requires minimal effort on my part. So let's go into this create assignment. And again, the link to this Google Classroom, the class code, I'm posting it again. And that's the website you want to go to. So as we make a new assignment, obviously you'll make the title of your assignment. The instructions, I think, are super helpful, especially if you have multiple attachments. So I find that students often do actually look at the instructions, despite how much grief we give them for not reading instructions. So it can be really helpful if you have, go to the first link and then fill out the form. You give students a roadmap for how to complete this, especially since students are going to be completing most of these assignments offline without your direct guidance. Putting as many instructions in that box is going to be really helpful, and making it as succinct as possible. Obviously, we don't want to read a wall of text. Students don't want to read a wall of text. I'll go into reuse post in just a minute, so I can answer that question, Amir. But when you add materials to an assignment, you have a variety of different options. You can add materials directly from your Google Drive, which is pretty straightforward. And it will show you, first of all, the most recent files. This sometimes trips people up because they think, what the heck, I can't find the document that I'm looking for. It's easiest just to go to the My Drive tab, and from here do a search for the document you're looking for, or navigate through the folders. I like to keep a lot of my common folders in starred. So you can, in Google Drive, you can star folders, and that makes it a lot easier to get to your commonly used folders. So let me just attach the agenda for this meeting. And what I can do over here is I can have students just be able to view the file. I can have students all be able to edit the same file. If I choose that, then all the students who are assigned to this will be able to edit the same document. That can be useful in some circumstances. For example, if you want some sort of collaborative document that everyone's going to work on. But in most circumstances, that'll be a hot mess, because then everyone's going to try to be editing the same thing at the same time. So you want to then, most of the time, you're going to want to make a copy for each student. So if you go down to make a copy for each student, what's going to happen when I assign this is everyone is going to get a copy of this Google Slides. Specifically for Google Slides, this can be helpful for making a template. If you want students to put together a presentation and you want them to have 6 slides, maybe you put titles on each of those slides. And what you could do is then you create that template, you add it in to this assignment, and then you make a copy for each student. At that point, they would all have their own copy of this particular presentation, and they would be able to edit it at will. When they submit it, then you would be looking at their version of it. That wouldn't affect any other student's version of it. So those are your 3 options for documents that you add. Now, if you add a link, then it's just going to add the link. For example, this is our Slack channel that I have set up for student communication. We're not going to be able to make a copy of that because it's just a link. You can also add files. Those are typically going to be files that are not in your Google Drive. They're files that could be on your computer. So these could be images. They could be you know, Microsoft Excel documents, anything like that. So this is tricky. Don't know what this is. There we go. How to prevent overfishing. Sounds good. So there's our image. All we have to do is click upload, and then that image is now added into added into this assignment. For certain files, not all files, it will actually allow you to make a copy for each student or edit the file. This is a relatively new feature. Most of the time, files do not carry this edit option. It's only for certain ones that Google recognizes. Finally, you can add YouTube videos. And you typically want to already have the address. So you would paste the YouTube video here. I don't have one offhand, but it's pretty straightforward. Let's find a cat video. And Charles was asking about this before. He was looking for some good cat videos. So there we go, baby cats. And now my YouTube video is attached. For the most part, my assignment is put together. Now, if I go over to the right-hand side, I have a few options. And this interface right here is actually relatively new. If you haven't used Google Classroom in a couple months, then this will look new to you. So over here, you can select multiple classes to post the same assignment to. So I find it helpful for specifically sending announcements to the various grade levels, 9th, 10th, 11th grade. Not everyone has access to all of the different announcement classes, but if you have multiple classes and you want to send the same announcement or the same assignment to multiple classes, this is where you can select those multiple classes and it will post to all of them at the same time. I'm not going to do that in this case, but what I could do is I could select individual students. So I'll go back, and if you click on this all students, what you can do is you can say, all right, I just want to assign this to the people who are currently on this call, and so let me just select only the people who I see. Let me tell me if I'm missing anybody. All right, now I've selected only the students who are on this particular assignment. You can combine this functionality here with the functionality of students can edit file. And you can imagine that I could create a group. So these 11 students who are on this call right now are now in a group, and they can all edit the same file. So you could do this for small groups, 4 or 5 or 6 students, where you select those students and you create a new assignment for each group. You allow them to edit the file, and then as a group, they can collaborate on the same file. Students find ways around this. If you just assign it to the whole class, what they'll do is they'll share the individual documents with each other. They're pretty good at that, so you don't have to go through this way, but this is an option for grouping students if you would like to approach it from this direction. So I've selected all the students that I want to assign this to, and now I can select a category. Now I have set up grade categories in my Google Classroom. In this particular demo classroom, there are the MYP criteria set up, so criteria A, B, C, and D. And if I select Criterion B, I can go ahead and change the number of points that this is worth. And in fact, there is a way to change the amount of default points so that it always goes to something like 8, depending on the category. If you're teaching DP classes, then your categories might look very different. They wouldn't necessarily be criteria, but you might have a standard point value that is you associate with each category. So you can still make that association within Google Classroom. The due date is pretty straightforward, but I cannot overemphasize the importance of a due date, especially since students use the due dates in order to plan their work. The due dates end up on their Google calendars. So you can set up, and students know how to set up, a lot of them know how to set up notifications coming out of Google Calendar. And those notifications coming out of Google Calendar will obviously fire off at the appropriate times, assuming you have the due dates put in. So again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to get these due dates in, and this will help, especially our 11th graders, remain nice and organized. So yeah, this will be due on Wednesday, and then my topics are available down here. So typically teachers organize topics into units. I'll get to questions in just a minute here. People typically organize topics into units, and what we notice is that I've got 5 units together along with a unit called resources. I find it really helpful to have some sort of generic topic at the beginning of my Google Classroom so that I can just dump random things that come along into that. It could be resources, it could be announcements, it could be materials, but that makes it easy for kids to find those things that you regularly use in the class. All right, and then I will get into rubrics in just a moment, but I want to make sure that I've addressed some questions here. So make sure that when you're logging into Google Classroom that you are logging in as a teacher and that you're using your Campus International High School account. If you're not using your Campus International account, then you will not be able to add the class. I'll get to the reuse post after I complete this assignment. I think Charles is a dog guy. You can, the question is, can you set up default subgroups and settings or before an assignment is assigned? Yes, and I will go out and I will show you how to do both the topics. I think you might be asking something else, and you can clarify. I think you're asking about subgroups of students, and that is unfortunately something you cannot do. We have been asking, the Google Classroom community has been asking for like 3 or 4 years about that functionality, and Google still hasn't come through. They claim that it would create too much complication within the interface. There are some interesting workarounds for that, but unfortunately there is no default subgroups. Mia is on her phone. Okay, so let's talk about rubrics really quick. I didn't call you out, it was Charles. Not my fault. All right. So we have 3 options for rubrics. You have create rubric, reuse rubric, and import from sheets. So let me talk about each of those in succession and then show you how create and reuse both work. So create rubric is making a rubric from scratch. Reuse rubric is reusing a rubric that exists on another assignment. And then import from sheets is a really helpful feature if one of your colleagues has a rubric and you don't have access to their class. Once they've created the rubric, they can actually export into Sheets, and then they can share that sheet with you, and then you can import that rubric. And so I could imagine that within your department, you might have some common tasks that you want to have the same rubric for, but you're not on each other's classes. So exporting and importing from Sheets is a way of sharing those rubrics. So if we click on Create Rubric, we see that there's a couple default options. Now you can choose to turn off scoring, and it'll just be qualitative and comments at that point, your rubric. I think it's really kind of useless to do that, but you may have your own needs for rubrics. I like the default of sorting the order of points on the rubric by descending. So what we could have here, for our criterion title, so someone help me out, give me a criterion title. Either unmute or in the chat. All right, Tom says Criterion A. I won't say anything about arts teachers and creativity. So Criterion A description, let's say information. Oh, sweet. Use of evidence. I don't know if that aligns with Criterion A, but sounds good to me. So let's say that we're gonna start with the biggest point value first. And we can call this biggest point value in the rubric anything we want as far as the title. I'm gonna go with an 8 is excellent. And then down here, this is the most important part of the whole rubric, and really being able to give students this automated feedback. So you did an excellent job using evidence within your essay. All right, next we'll make, of course, points 7, and we'll say very good. And you need to use one more piece of evidence in your essay. You can write this, rubric writing is an art of its own. I think that when you reuse rubrics that IB provides, it makes it really easy to just make a list of the things that should need to be present in order to get 8, in order to get 7. You can use this as feedback so that students know what they need to do in order to get up to the next level on the rubric. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, obviously. Clearly, it would go down to 1. But you can skip point levels if you want. You don't have to have every single point level. And then you can add a second criterion. So we don't just have to have one criterion. We could have Criterion C. Now, if we try to put in, for example, 7 to 8, it doesn't let us do that because this needs to be quantitative. The reason that this needs to be an integer is that it gets linked into the actual Google Classroom grade. So the really magical part of this is when you grade students on the rubric, it automatically calculates their grade, and then when you say it's complete, it sends it back to them on Google Classroom. Obviously, this is not integrated with ManageBack, so you still need to replicate that grade in ManageBack, but it does not allow you to do grade bands. I think the best way to replicate grade bands is to, instead of doing 1 through 8, maybe you do 1 through 4, or you simply go down from 8 to 6 to 4 to 2, something along those lines. It all depends on the task and how much granularity you're really looking for. So that's how you can create a rubric. I think it limits you to 10 criteria. It keeps a total of how many points we have created so far. It is very picky. make sure that you're actually adding in all of the points that you're supposed to have. Once you're done, you hit save. So let's just make sure we have something in here. So we'll hit save. And now we have a rubric attached to this assignment. If I want to edit it, I can always go back into this assignment, click on the rubric, and I go to the three-dot menu and click edit. And here's where that magical export to sheets comes up so that I can share this rubric with my colleagues, or I can save it for another class. And I can also change my view of the rubric so that I can see all of the criteria together. When you are grading an assignment, it's going to appear on the side more or less like this. So this would be the first, the second, and the third. When you hover over, it will tell you what that description, not the description is, but the name is for every aspect of the rubric. And you can click on the arrow when you're grading in order to see the entire description as you're going through and grading on the rubric. I find that the more practice you have grading with the rubric, the more it's just automatic. You obviously, just as you would on paper, you get to know the rubric really well, and you don't have to look at the descriptions each and every time. So let me get out of the edit the rubric, and I'm going to delete this rubric because I want to show you how to reuse a rubric. So if we go to reuse rubric, we see that all the other assignments that I have rubrics attached to will pop up. And in fact, I can go to my other classes. So I have a lot of rubrics in my Environmental Systems and Societies class. So many rubrics that we're going to be looking at the spinny thing for a while. Tom had a question: if you have bands of 6 and 8, can you still give a score 7? You could adjust the score on the final grade in classroom before you send it back to kids, because the rubrics, they suggest a grade, but they don't force you to actually assign that grade. So if you gave a 6, but it was really a 7, you would actually type that in to their final grade. All right, so let's say I want to use this rubric for activity, ozone, and CFCs. I can even preview it to make sure that it's the right rubric. Looks good. I've got my criteria, I've got my grade bands, and I can either select and edit it, so I could change it for this particular assignment, or I could just say, you know what, it works. It's a generic rubric. I'm just going to select it, and now it's attached to this assignment. Let me take a pause. Any questions so far? Okay. All right. So
can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
If a kid joins the class like now, but your class has been in existence for the whole year, do they have access to all the previous assignments, or just the ones that are currently live?
They do have access to all the previous assignments, and in fact, when they join the class, what gets created for them is a copy of each document that you said make a copy for each student. That feature, unfortunately, is a little buggy. So sometimes when they go to an assignment that you previously created and you said make a copy for each student of this one document, that document sometimes says like there was an error in creating the document, and it gives students an option to make a copy at that moment. So they still have the option to make a copy of that document so that it will get attached to the assignment. So they can go back through like the entire year and make sure that they have everything submitted for the entire year. All right, other questions? All right, so since you are students on this class, when I click assign, then you will actually see that assigned to your Google Classroom. Depending on what view you're on, you might see Stream has updated, or you might see some other notification. You might get no notification at all, depending on your view, but if you refresh the Classwork tab, then you will see the assignment that I just posted. So for reuse post, and let me know if I'm answering your question here. If we click reuse post, this looks very similar to the interface that we had for Rubrics. And let's go ahead and grab from a different class. So I'm going to go back and I will select a class. Let me go to environmental. And in environmental, it shows me literally every single assignment that I have created. So this is a long list. It'll continue going on for a while. There is unfortunately no search functionality, but it will show you the most recent assignments first. Yes, post is an umbrella term for announcements and assignments. So if I go here and I say, all right, here's my forum post that I was talking about before, and I reuse, then it will give me the whole assignment all over again. All right, I'm not on assignment number 141 anymore. Now I'm on assignment 151, and everything else is going to be the same. This is the link to the Google group. Point values are the same, grade category. This obviously is not in my environmental class, so the grade categories aren't the same. I can change the due date to reflect March 30th. If I want to, I can change the topic. And then all I have to do is assign. And it will automatically just, everything copies over, including the attached files. So it makes it really easy to reuse any post that you do regularly. So that's how you reuse posts. Does that answer your question? Then I wanted to go over best practices for organizing Classroom. So for this, I'm going to go back to environmental. I have about 20 Zoom windows up here. Okay. Now, as I said in my stream, I try to keep the stream limited to announcements. It automatically will post on the stream. If you choose to, it'll automatically post any assignments that have been posted on the stream. But I tell students always start on the Classwork tab. So for me, the best thing is to have a topic that I label as resources, and this is like that catch-all that I was talking about, where we have materials and we have like the syllabus is in here and how to write a lab report, all of these things that students will have to access over the course of the year. Now in the DP, since there's both internal assessment and external assessment, I have found it useful to have a topic specifically dedicated for the IA and also for the EA, so that students know, all right, we're working on the EA over the course of the year. This is where you're going to find all of the different assignments, tasks, materials for the IA. Same thing with the EA. And I put those up front because obviously they are really important things that should be things that students see all the time. I'll mention my numbering scheme here in just a minute. But then we start with topic 1. And you notice that on the left-hand side, all of these topics, if I scroll back up, all of these topics on the left-hand side are listed. And so if I want to see just all of the assignments in topic 1, I can click on topic 1. Students can do this too. So they're only looking at one unit or one topic of instruction. And then they get to see all the details at the same time so that they can navigate through and figure out what is best for them to use at the moment. Let me go back to the classwork tab and go back to topic 1. So any materials that I throw in to a topic that are not assignments, I do not number them, but I do number everything else. My numbering scheme is 3 numbers. So start with 001 and the number sign. The reason I do that is it helps to sort everything. When you're looking in Google Drive, sometimes the sorts can be all sorts of wonky. You don't know why things are sorting the way they do. But if you sort it by name, then this will make sure that everything actually gets sorted in order so that you can see everything in your Google Drive in order. This also makes it really easy to talk about assignments, especially if you want everyone to go to the same assignment. They don't have to be looking at the name. You can just say, go to assignment number 20. And so what I've done up here for the internal assessment is that I start every internal assessment assignment with IA and then 2 digits. The reason I do that is because it is not happening, it is happening at the same time, it's not happening sequentially. So we did IA01 in September, we did number 4 in November, we did actually probably 4 through 9 in November, and then we did the rest of them in January. So it would be kind of disconcerting for a student to see, you know, number 5 and then number 23. And it's a lot easier just to think of these as their own sequence. So I start them with IA to offset them. The last thing I wanted to say, I mentioned it before, but I can't emphasize enough the due dates. You see all these assignments have due dates, and when students go into the calendar, so let's take a look at this calendar. And let's just take a look at environmental. This week obviously isn't a great week to show this, but here is the calendar for March 8th to March 14th. Students can see at a glance, because they get the same view. They can see when things are due as long as the due dates are on there. And they can also subscribe to notifications on their Google Calendar. It'll go right to their phone. And that way they'll know 24 hours or however long they choose, maybe 72 hours before, they'll get a notification that a particular assignment is due. This is a really good way to foster organization in the students and making sure that they know when things are due. So always show them that calendar and try to keep it up to date. All right, any questions about best practices? Okay, so the next part I wanted to talk about was how to upload these Zoom recordings to YouTube. And we'll see how this actually works. I tried to record myself on a YouTube video using Zoom, so this may or may not actually have worked. But it is fortunately a fairly straightforward process. All right, there's no audio on this, so I'll narrate it as we go through. Once it actually loads, if it loads. This is an example of not a best practice. Always practice before you actually do it. All right. So this is the Zoom window, and I made my recording right here, recorded to the computer. You'll always have that record button. Then I click stop. Once I end the meeting, then what it does is it converts that recording. You can then save the recording. You can choose a different location other than the default location. I just tend to use the default location. Click save, and then what you'll see is, I've got a couple windows open here, but you will see that recording pop up as it did in the bottom right-hand corner. It saves the files as MP4 files. There were 2 recordings off of that session, and so what I did is I clicked on the one recording, and I previewed it just to make sure it was the right recording. Turns out it was the right recording. And so then I go over here to YouTube. On the YouTube window, you want to log in underneath your your campus Google account. We all have access to YouTube. And then you click on your channel. Once you click on your channel, then you are going to see a couple options. Yours is going to look a little bit different than mine. Mine is all fleshed out. I've got a lot of different videos on my channel. Yours will probably be pretty blank. You can customize the channel, but in order to add a video, you go up to the upper right-hand corner where that little camera is, click on Upload Video, and then you will get what is called the YouTube Studio. And all you have to do is grab the video you want, drag it in, and drop it, and then it will start to give you some options about that video. So the first option is giving it a title. Title is obviously really important. So important that I called it something generic like Sample Zoom Meeting. Description is also really helpful, especially if you regularly record. I usually include the date. If you want to add it to a playlist, playlist works just like it would any other kind of playlist does, where you have a collection of videos. I always select yes, it's made for kids. This makes sure that there's going to be no ads on the video. And once you've done that, click on next. Because it's for kids, you won't be able to add an end screen or cards. So click next. And you have an option of going public, unlisted, or private. Most of the time you want the video to be public, makes it easier for the kids to find. If you make it unlisted, you have to share the link explicitly with other people. If it's private, you actually have to click share in order to allow people to see the video. Once that's all done, you hit save, and then you're all done. I know that went pretty quick, but this is also this is also available on, this will be available on YouTube itself, on my YouTube, and I'll make sure I post it. So let me go back here and let me go to my channel. All right, I see some questions I'll get to in a minute here. So if I click on Customize Channel, I can show you what it looks like from this perspective. Here I have all the videos that I've recorded, and I can click on My Channel to see what that looks like for everybody else. Every one of these is a different playlist. And so Amir's suggestion of having a different playlist for every class, that's what I do. So ESS Zoom meetings, this is all from last week. Same thing with CSHL, Intro to CS, and Physics. That way students can go ahead and look at these. They can visit them on their own time. And you see that the first video, a lot of kids looked at, 33 views, and then it kind of petered out after there. So we'll have to bump that back up. So then a couple questions that folks have. What if a student has not accepted an invite to a Google class? They cannot see the Google class if they don't accept the invite, so you definitely need to reach out to them. You can't, it's difficult to force a student to be added to the class. However, it depends on if they are in other Google classes. If they are, then you can actually add them and they will automatically be added to your class. So if we go to People, and I click on Students, for example, I can make Mr. Ellenbogen a student in my class. Oh, it's the wrong one. Don't invite CMSD emails. Always invite campus emails. Oh, you just don't want to be a student, do you, Charles? All right. That was a bad example. So if I, for example, if Anaya was not already a student, I could invite her that way and click invite. It won't let me because she's already a student in the class. And in order to invite parents, you have to invite them associated with the student. So if we wanted to invite Michaela's parent, then you would type Michaela's mom at gmail.com. And it doesn't actually check to see if that exists. It just says, hey, that looks like an email address to me. You know, you click on it and click invite, and that will be associated with her. The good thing about this is if you associate an email address of a parent with a student, then it will be associated with that student over all of their Google classes. Students without Wi-Fi, Amir might be able to better answer that question than me. Oh, and he did. Look at that. The newsletter about Spectrum and Cox Free for 60 days. Yep, adding new students, and then adding your 10th grade students. Nelson, we can go over that individually about adding 10th grade students. I think it may be a email scheme issue. And yes, you have to have a valid parent email in order to invite students, in order to invite guardians, rather. Good questions, keep them coming. All right. Any other questions about Classroom or Zoom or YouTube? I'd like to be done in the next couple minutes. Let everyone get back to their rest and relaxation. All right. So the last thing I wanted to touch on was what I went over with the students today. All these different resources. So you have access to these resources as well. So now I'm in the Google Classroom PD student view, and this assignment is Spring Break and Online Learning Resources. Amir sent out a link for all of the parent emails. I'm gonna definitely have to save that. That's, I've had that question come up. So if you notice, there's a whole lot of links on here. So let me just walk you through it real quick. I'm gonna start at the end. This Google Slides Spring Break sessions is what I've been going through with the students. So you can see it in a more fun format. But at the top here, here's the MindShift app. This is for iTunes. This is for the Apple Store. This is for the Android Store. That's how you can download that app. or you can just search for MindShift. CBT stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, right? I saw her say yes. All right. To create an account in Slack, this is the invitation to do so. This is my YouTube channel, so you can see everything that I've been talking about on the YouTube channel, and also you will be able to see this recording itself in case I went too quickly or you had to bug out. Charles is not shaving. Oh, and by the way, did you know what a Zoom mullet is? I just learned this. So here's my Zoom mullet. I don't know if you can see it, but I've got shorts on, business up top, party on the bottom. All right. So Khan Academy link, really helpful resources. They're going above and beyond to make sure that kids are prepped during this time. Charles, do you want to talk about Libby real quick? Is he still on? Yeah, there he is. Make sure you're unmuted. Yep.
There's really not much to say. It's just very use. You can do audio or print books. Certainly the books we teach in school are there. And yeah, it's just easy to read on your phone or on the computer. So it's all just trying to encourage students to pick something of interest, maybe pick the same thing as a friend so they have another way to make a connection.
Can you talk about the Goodreads? How much activity there's been on that?
Trying to revive Goodreads a little bit, again, to make connections. Maybe Amanda, Sophia, anybody can set challenges. If you can revive your own account and have some activity, go there. Just trying to promote communication, reading, all of that, community, that kind of thing.
And poets.org?
Oh, just you can get a poem a day. Always is a nice way to take a pause at the beginning of the day or the end of the day to read one, see if you like it.
Awesome, thank you. And there's a couple more things that we have on here to help students with literacy. So Seesaw is a way for students to demonstrate their creativity. I'm sure that Tom and Jeremy have some other ideas, but as far as the creative writing piece, we wanted students to be able to share not only poetry, short stories, but also pictures and drawings and videos, and Seesaw allows you to do that. And I'll get to questions in just a second. I'm getting a few really good questions. There also, I've linked a whole bunch of different games, games that hopefully challenge students in different ways. I'm trying to emphasize this, making sure that students are disconnecting, and they're disconnecting from kind of all of this sad, scary news, and spending time, half an hour, doing some sort of games, whether that's board games, whether that's card games, whether that's online video games, whether that's like online Connect 4, online Sudoku, math games, that sort of thing. Just getting them to try to take care of themselves by not focused on social media, not focused on all the negative news all the time. Also a couple links as to how to make their own taboo game, which is a really fun way to play with families, or they could even play over video conference. Same thing with Mafia, in person, just really silly game to play at home. Lee Chess, trying to get kids playing chess and hopefully sharing their accounts so that we're able to play chess with them and challenge them a little bit. There's Mia, did you want to talk about the individual student conferences that you're going to have with kids?
Yeah, I normally sit down with kids to go over their credits with them, just, the CMSD credits. So I thought, this would be a way to do that. And John put this great form together for me. So we can get those conferences done. And that's pretty much it.
Awesome, thank you. So, and you can take a look at what Mia's going to be talking about with the kids, this transcript conference template. I think the most important thing that I put together for this week was this developing a routine document. I would really like feedback on this. I've already got a ton of notes that I've been taking from a variety of people about what to add, what are some good suggestions for how students might develop their own routine. So take a look at that document. I'm not trying to include every single little thing, but I am trying to include ideas so students aren't overwhelmed, but they feel like they can actually make a schedule, a daily schedule, and stick to it. And then some really good questions here about, first of all, breakout rooms in Zoom. I have access to make breakout rooms because I paid for Zoom before it went free, which was awesome. And I don't know if everyone has access to breakout rooms. I was just looking something up real quick, and I think even the free versions do have access to that, but you have to activate it in the settings. So you have to go pretty deep into the settings on Zoom in order to activate breakout rooms. It might even be easier for you to do a web search on Zoom's help, do a search on their help for how to navigate through. I only found it at like the 3rd level of settings as to how to activate breakout rooms. And I haven't played around with it yet, so I don't have best practices for you yet. You can, so for Seesaw, if you make an account, you can invite other teachers to be co-teachers on the same account. So we could have all teachers on the same Seesaw account, and we could all be seeing this creative writing that students are creating. Now, breakout rooms in Zoom are kind of like virtual sub-meeting rooms, where a breakout room would be if we wanted to split up into groups of 3, then I, as the host, could make like 5 different breakout rooms, and I could assign individual members of my meeting to those breakout rooms. And so that maybe it's just Yassine, Mia, and Amir in one breakout room, Kenneth, Molly, and Nelson in another breakout room, and you all can have these individualized discussions. I, as the host, can still cycle through the different breakout rooms. And so if you have a lot of students and you want to do some live group work with them, then breakout rooms would be an ideal way to organize that so that you're not having one gigantic conversation.